Welcome to the National Assembly for Wales. Croeso cynnes I Gymru ac I Gynulliad Cenedlaethol Cymru. So we'll start with the first presentation, which is by Ethan Gutmann, who is an award-winning research journalist and author who testified before the US House Committee on Foreign Affairs and recently published The Slaughter, based on his research on forced organ harvesting in China. Welcome, Croeso.
Thank you so much.
We look forward to hearing your presentation.
For those of us who engage in primary research on the organ harvesting of prisoners of conscience in China, this particular hearing comes at the end of a very important and very ominous year. Winter saw the fatal collapse of 2 years of Western medical engagement with Chinese authorities, Chinese medical authorities on this subject. Spring brought new evidence that the mass harvesting of prisoners of conscience was not only continuing, it is accelerating. Fall carried with it the news that particularly ominous news and very new, that Minghui reports that people are being given Falun Gong, are being given a blood test and DNA samples, DNA swabs from their mouth. This is a form of tissue matching. But they're not being given them in labor camps. It's being done in their own homes. And this is consistent across 12 provinces. Now, this is very new information. It came out 2 weeks after my book was published. But I find it very disturbing. Now, the last point I make is, since we last were here, I could say that people from the UK are still going to China. Now, I'm holding in my hands a report on this. It's very current. It's up to date. It's based on 80 FOIA requests to hospitals across the UK, including in Wales. And I personally just came back from Birmingham last week, where I interviewed someone who's confidential, but he received a kidney in China. I'll go ahead and say in Xi'an Armed Forces Hospital. That was just a couple of years ago. So this idea that we are not in the picture, that this is once upon a time in China, or this is happening in a far, far away land, is not true. We are one world. This is all part, we all have a responsibility with this, because this is partly what fuels this industry. But let me proceed to my talk now, and sort of give you a sense of the history that led up to this. So let's begin in the mid-1990s with these three men who just carried out an execution. If you look, it's kind of an interesting picture. The enlisted man on the left there, the armed policeman, he's trying to look official. He's giving us a barrier sign. His comrade to the right with the mustache suggests that it's all a big joke. It's okay. And in the foreground, the supreme officer, he's wearing a white rag against back splatter because he's done the firing. He's trying to protect his uniform from the blood. He meets our gaze defiantly. Now, these are the eternal faces of execution. You will see them, if you blur these racial features, you'll see a similar kind of photograph out of almost any authoritarian state over the last century. But from an official Chinese perspective, there's nothing surreptitious taking place in this photograph. The signs of the executed prisoners indicate that they were duly convicted of capital crimes, murder, rape, drug sales, etc. Their bodies will be gathered into medical vans, harvested for kidneys and livers. That's not secret either. This is about 1995, and since 2006, Beijing has admitted that the vast majority of the organs that Chinese hospitals transplant into aging Western organ tourists and rich Chinese are from death row prisoners. Now, 20 years later, these are the new executioners. In this photograph, these surgeons are carrying freshly extracted organs. The critical change since the mid-1990s to now is that the majority of retail organs in China are not extracted from death row convicts, but from prisoners of conscience. These are political and religious prisoners who cannot be sentenced to death even under the vagaries of Chinese law. That is, we're talking about a Tibetan monk or a Uyghur activist who shook his fist in a demonstration and maybe said Allah Akbar, a Falun Gong woman who passed out leaflets on the street of China. Now, this transformation required an infrastructure. And this map includes, it's very hard to read here, and I'm sorry about that, but includes major police and medical installations, even crematoriums in one case, across China that have been involved in organ harvesting. Now, I want to tell you, this is not a comprehensive map. A comprehensive map would be almost indecipherable. This is just simply map of locations in my new book, Relevant Sites and Locations. I had a big argument with the editor about this because I said, look, this is just in my book. Now, the fact is, the Chinese medical system is said to generate approximately 10,000 transplants per year, and the number of legally executed prisoners is well below 5,000. Voluntary organ donations are negligible. So this suggests very clearly another source. But I would say we don't just have to solely rely on mysterious numerical gaps. We can track this 20-year transformation through witnesses, and that's what I try to do in my new book. We don't have time for all of them by any means today, so that's why I wrote a book, and let's look at just one. This is, at the northwest corner of that map, you'd see the Urumqi Central Railway Hospital, and in 1995, one of the surgeons from that hospital, Dr. Enver Totti, was driven to Western Mountain execution grounds, and following an apparently routine mass execution of prisoners, a prisoner was singled out for harvesting. This man was alive. The gunshot was deliberately aimed to the left of the chest to produce shock that could act as a natural anesthesia. Dr. Totti was told to remove the man's kidneys and liver. Following the prisoner's single reflexive contraction when he made the first incision, Dr. Totti performed the extraction based on the blood, which was pulsing. The man's heart was beating till the end. Now, from the party's perspective, this was actually a medical advance because live organ harvesting promotes a lower rate of rejection of a new host. It's like cutting flowers under running water and putting it into a vase. Now, hardcore criminals have a lot of health problems. And David Montes has I think, talked about this extensively, written about this. And the main one is hepatitis. So 2 years later, Xinjiang, that is the northwest corner of China, was the staging point for a second change in medical ethics. According to a medical doctor who was forced to take blood samples of Uyghur political prisoners, the first organ harvesting of political prisoners who were not sentenced to death, again, was carried out in Urumqi on behalf of 5 high-ranking Chinese Communist Party officials who come in search of young, healthy organs. They got their organs, they cleared out. 6 months later, there were another 5. Now, live organ harvesting then becomes routine across China at the end of the 90s. But the harvesting of prisoners of conscience who had not been convicted of capital crimes was initially confined to this one area, Xinjiang. In 1999, that changed. The Chinese state security launches its largest action of scale since the Cultural Revolution, the eradication of Falun Gong. Yet by 2000, this blitzkrieg has become trench warfare. According to both witnesses inside labor camps and foreign doctors who were offered Falun Gong organs on a two-order basis, and I refer you to chapter 9 here, it's very explicit about the doctors, Chinese military hospitals began targeting select Falun Gong prisoners for harvesting. This is established. The critical point is that the organ harvesting of prisoners of conscience did not begin with Falun Gong, it starts organically. But the central decision to exploit prisoners of conscience on a mass scale was little more than a sort of legal blurring around the edges. And so the skepticism that most people initially feel when they hear about this story surrounding organ harvesting of prisoners of conscience, it's always revolved around the following questions. Why would the Chinese Communist Party, so rich in resources and power, so eager for international acclaim, take such a risk? And thus the investigative problem becomes one of motive and of plausibility, not just the how, but the why. And that question dominates 6 out of 10 chapters in my book, and I'll just touch on it here. Now you may have heard that the party's decision to crush Falun Gong was driven by Falun Gong's size. And at 70 million, there were 5 million more practitioners than party members in China, and that's absolutely true. Yet it is also germane that Falun Gong came from the Chinese heartland. It had no Western intellectual or foreign trappings. So you could say that the party's fear had more to do with this little boy in the front of the picture, dressed up in somebody else's PLA uniform. because boys like this were growing up to be men, and perhaps soldiers of the People's Liberation Army, as this one was, who was photographed in Changchun Central Square. But the real fears, the deepest fears, has to do with this woman. If there's anyone who scared the Chinese Communist Party, it was this Ding Jing. Now, she was a Falun Gong coordinator, which is not really that big a deal. It just means you're allowed to teach the exercises. And in her case, she also carried around a garbage bag to pick up any trash that was left on a field after people had done the Falun Gong exercises. She looked after 3 exercise sets. The first was for China Central Television and Xinhua News Agency. So this is the propaganda department of China. This is in Beijing. The second was for the Public Security Bureau. This is the secret police of China. The third was for high-ranking Chinese Communist Party officials and their wives. Now for the party, I submit that Ding Jing's sights seem to spring out of the Marxist template for seizing power. You start in the heartland, you infiltrate the intellectuals, then the military and the leadership itself. And so for the nationalist elements of the party who believe that this is China's century, Falun Gong's belief in truth, compassion, forbearance, these suggested an earlier China, a passive China, a weak China, easily dominated. Now that theory was wrong, and I go into that in some depth in my book, because Falun Gong's resistance in the labor camps, and indeed globally, was not passive. It was extraordinary, as was the party's ferocious response. Now, as I say, I've got several chapters on this, and I won't show you pictures of labor camps or atrocities here. But I'll show you this picture of Falun Gong refugees, because this is a pretty good numerical representation of my book, if you take out this guy in the middle. All of these women were in labor camp. All were tortured. One of them was sexually abused. I don't say which one. The woman on the left, Jing Qian, was given a series of physical examinations. What was it? 8 blood tests per practitioner? 8 blood tests per practitioner, aimed exclusively at assessing the health of her retail organs, even her corneas. And this was also based on tissue matching. Now, from a sample of 50 refugees, which is not a great sample, but is a wartime sample we'll have to do, I conclude that 500,000 to 1 million Falun Gong are incarcerated in any given time. By 2008, approximately 65,000 Falun Gong had been harvested for their organs. And my calculations on this are published in 2 books, in the slaughter and also in state organs. And my estimate is used as a baseline calculation in the text of U.S. Congress House Resolution 281, which is currently under consideration. Now, David Kilgour and David Modis, extrapolating from official Chinese numbers, estimate that approximately 60,000 Falun Gong organs were harvested by 2008. Now, that's an apples and oranges comparison between fatalities and organs. But clearly we're collectively looking at fatalities above 50,000. Now, Tibetan refugees, the numbers are much smaller, but many Tibetans, Uyghurs, and even some house Christians received the same testing as Falun Gong during this period. Enforced disappearances of Uyghurs, in fact, are quite extraordinary right now. They're huge. I can't estimate fatalities at this time for any of those groups. I can only say these are 2 Tibetans, one of them is a monk, who made it back alive. Some brief final points. Any pretense that harvesting was not state-controlled evaporated with the discovery in 2012 of these photographs of Wang Lijun. Now, I know it's a Chinese name for the Western audience, so don't blank out. There may be a name you've heard of, which is Bo Xilai. Now, Bo Xilai would be comparable to talking about, I don't know, pick your political candidate who didn't quite make it. But Bo Xilai was a contender for the presidency of China. This was his right-hand man. This was his protege. This is a photograph of his protege directing live organ harvesting. He was given an award for it. He was given an award for a special lethal injection method which protected the organs while he was doing this. He performed thousands of transplants according to the award, and he said that he found it soul-stirring to watch a life pass from one body to another. Now, you know, it's interesting to tie this into Wales for a second. Xiamen is your sister city here. And Xiamen has a very similar pattern. I mean, it's got a series of doctors. This is according to the World Organization to Investigate Persecution of Falun Gong. They have a series of doctors who've done a series of operations. There's no question they are liver and kidney harvesting. World Organization to Investigate the Persecution of Falun Gong is a Chinese organization, but it tends to sometimes overstate things a little bit in the kind of Chinese style, and it tends to be written not in the perfect English. But I find their material very, very useful. My book, follow my endnotes, if you don't believe me. I absolutely think they have shown again and again their value. Look, these pictures come from them. This is a major breakthrough, and the fact is, we now know Xiamen is another center of organ harvesting. Now, this picture, in fact, led the medical establishment in China to try to change things. This is Huang Jiefu. He's performed over 500 liver transplants, and he admits this. And he also said, China is not an ethical environment for transplantation, and that got the excitement going, and the head of the Transplantation Society, Francis Delmonico, the Transplantation Society, the most revered society for this, for doctors, got very involved in the idea of engagement, and they promised that they would end all harvesting of prisoners, not prisoners of conscience, prisoners, within 3 to 5 years. And then finally they kept pushing up the date, and then it was supposed to happen in June. That conference, celebration conference that was supposed to follow this one, this open bar picture, never happened. It's like the Tokyo Olympics. Disappears into history. Because Huang Jiefu announced we're going to continue to harvest these prisoners as long as we need to. We're just going to get better forms. So we are left with this snapshot, better times. And we are also left, by the way, this got blocked from my book. It's the only photo that did. And we're also left with a policy vacuum, which we look to you to fill. Now, I just want to mention one final point about this. I mean, one component of this was supposed to be that all foreign organ tourism to China was ending. But in fact, this is an organ broker openly advertising on the web. And it was only taken off 3.5 months ago. That's when it disappeared. It was up there for years. So anyone who wanted to could go to Shenzhen, China, and have this organ broker arrange things. These are not things that happen in China. I finally, throughout that period, harvesting of Falun Gong did not end either. This woman was given an organs-only exam. She's 56 years old. She's a Falun Gong practitioner. She was given it in May 2013, along with 500 other prisoners, mainly Falun Gong. So, a few years ago in a similar function, well, look, I'll just go to this point. I live here. I live in London. I'm actually becoming a dual citizen this year, and I know that Wales cannot make policy for the rest of the UK. Neither can Edinburgh. But your participation is vital in what I'm going to suggest. And I think I ask you to read my book with a critical eye. And I don't tell you what to think about China. If you believe China is a good investment, perhaps it is. The history I've just given you is true too. And that history is still being written, even here in this room today. In Wales, I did not ask you to follow the path of divestment or trade war. I ask you to follow your own values. And as somebody who's going to be a UK citizen, I'd say they're my values too. No Welsh citizen can be complicit in a scheme where an innocent person will be killed so that he or she may live. Right now, the thing that's blocking us from understanding what's really going on in the UK is patient confidentiality. Now, if somebody comes in with a wound in their body, we don't accept that. We don't accept patient confidentiality. But for some reason, if somebody else is cut open with a very sharp instrument, that's okay. Now that's a problem. The fact is, together we have the power to stop this. The basic mechanism of criminalizing organ tourism is humbly mysterious. If you go to China and you come back with a new organ, you will be incarcerated until the Chinese authorities provide a full accounting of this crime against humanity. Speaking to history, I believe this is precisely the model that Wales, the rest of the United Kingdom should follow. Thank you.